Welcome, everyone. Welcome to our live. We're about to start in a few minutes. I'm so glad Peggy's here. There's so many people who I know from Substack and from other platforms here. Today, oh my gosh, Anne is here. Okay, I always do this. I'm sort of like squirrel, 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 squirrel. There's Yvonne. Okay, I'm going to stop doing that. Okay, so
I'm
today,
so sorry about the movement.
no, it's fun. It makes me feel like it's B-roll of some kind of movie. Okay, so I'm Ronit Plank, and I am the host of Let's Talk Memoir, the podcast, and I have the Substack Let's Talk Memoir, and very original. And I'm celebrating this month 200 episodes of Let's Talk Memoir, which I just can't even believe. I kind of looked at my screen of all the episodes I'd had, and I was like scrolling, 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 and I was like, wow, I've done a lot of episodes. And I know that sounds like a pat on the back, but sometimes you have to stop and realize, wow, look at what I have accomplished so far, right? So you can all take a
Yes.
moment and just sort of be thankful to yourself for where you've been and what you've accomplished, because I didn't know I was setting out to do that. Today I'm joined by Sherry Sidoti, who is a friend of mine. I became friends with after we did a podcast episode together. And Sherry's book is called A Smoke and a Song. And Sherry, that when did that memoir come out?
August 2023.
Yeah, so it's still pretty recent. And
hmm
you're also you have been the founder of a yoga school, a yogi. Do you want to just talk a little bit about your previous career, what you do now, and a bit about your embodied writing programs?
Sure, I would love to. First of all, I just wanted to say hello and congratulations, Ronit. I mean, 200 episodes is no small feat. And now you're 200 plus
Yeah,
episodes because I think you've had a few since the announcement of your celebration. And I mean, you do so much for the memoir community and for memoirists, and I just want to thank you so much. And congratulate you.
thank
So
you.
thanks for having me here. I'm so happy to be here. Always great to see you and spend time
You
with you.
too. You too. I love seeing your face.
Yes. So I have a 20-something year career of teaching yoga, training yoga teachers, embodiment, somatic movement, trauma, integration, and healing. And, I've been part of the healing arts community for many, many years, a couple decades. And in 2020, right during the pandemic lockdown, I took some time off from my teachings and my offerings to start to write. And it did morph into my memoir, A Smoke and a Song. And I found that I really integrated those two lives, the writing life and embodiment and contemplation and meditation and movement. And so once my book came out and I was doing a lot of talks, book talks,
Yeah.
and traveling around and meeting lots of people, what I found is that most people were really interested in how I used my decades of yoga, meditation, embodiment in my writing practice of writing my own memoir. And it really kind of inspired me to start to really pick it apart and deconstruct it because I just did it because it's part of who I am. And I wasn't really putting thought process into it. But
Mhm.
when I started to deconstruct it and what I was doing in my writing practice, I realized that it could be very, very useful for other memoirists and those who are interested in just diving into their own life experiences and writing them. And so I started to formulate, it took some time to formulate a program, a 6-week program. Well, it's supposed to be 6 weeks. It keeps going and going and going.
Yeah,
But
because your
um,
students love you, and I was
yeah,
lucky enough to speak to a group of your students, I think last year, and I got to experience myself the way you approach memoir teaching with this embodied angle, and I'm gonna stop interrupting you, but we will speak about that in a second, so go on. So you started the
yeah, no,
6-week
please
program. Yeah.
interrupt as much as you want. And we loved having you there. And when you came, it was such an epiphany for everyone in my program. So it was just such a gift to have you there. I want to bring you back.
I
Um,
wanna come back.
yeah, good. All right. Well, we'll talk about that after
Yeah,
this.
yeah,
But
offline.
um, So I mean, I really started to I kind of formulated this starting off as a 6-week program where we could really take some of the practices that I used when I was exploring my memoir and writing and merge it with memoir writing craft and create a program that I now offer, which I'm calling the Embodied Memoir Writing Series. And then that morphed into once the six, my start of my first group, and then the 6 weeks came to an end. Those who were with me wanted to continue to write. And so I've been furthering the program, level 2, and then another level, and then another level, as well as starting new groups. So to date, I think I've done probably 8 sessions of the so it's a couple years, almost 2 years that I've been offering this program. And, sometimes the program continues with the same group, sometimes I merge groups, but I about 3 or 4 times a year started a new group, and I have
I
a
don't know
new
how you do it all because there's only one of you. I mean, although I guess you have the curriculum kind of set now, so you know how to take them through the first couple of weeks, or does it change a lot?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that when you're practicing embodiment, and I could talk a little bit
Let's
about
talk
that.
about let me
Yeah.
put a little let's bookmark this because I want to tell you, I want to confess, and I think I've told you this before. I don't know how many people who are here with us today feel they are connected to their body. They're tapped into maybe their physiology when they're writing or ever. I personally come from an experience of sort of separating my body from my brain. And I know sometimes that comes from trauma, from early childhood experience, maybe from your family of origin, the way that we did or did not talk about our body. But and this is another little bookmark in what I'm about to say, which is one thing I adore about memoir teaching and learning is that we all approach it so differently, and it can
Mhm.
all we can gather all these resources and tools to create this whole and our own product, right? So your approach to memoir writing is offering something to memoirists that I don't necessarily touch on when I teach memoir, right? And
Right.
so can you, for people who are not quite clear on what embodied writing means, just share a little bit about what that is?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So if you think about it this way, we move through life taking in, absorbing, having experiences, right?
Mm,
And every experience that we have, we're filtering through our physical body. We're having, visceral response to the experience. There's an emotional part of the experience, of course, mental part of the experience, maybe some quieter, subtle parts of our experience that we're having, like in the energy body, or even spiritual if you subscribe to a spiritual practice. And we're filtering and living life through all of these parts of ourself. And then they lend themselves again to when we are thinking about memory or when we're considering memory. So in a s- in an embodied perspective, memory also lives in our physical body. It lives in our emotional body. It lives in our mental body. It lives in our psychic body. It lives in our heart and our soul and our spiritual self. So memory is not something that we can only access from the mind.
mm,
Memory and writing about, say, our memories as a memoirist can be accessed through so many doorways to the self.
yeah.
And so it helps us there's so many aspects of, when we connect to the very fullness of living as a multidimensional person in all of these bodies. And when we can take on very simple practices that help us to connect and remember that when we sit down to write, not only are we writing from that place, which helps us with the whole self-care part of it, the getting triggered by our memories part, there's a lot of integration that's happening when we approach our writing practice from an embodied place. But also we can return to a once was self, the memory that we're going back into, or the past version of ourself that had that lived experience, and we can actually recall it through that, multidimensional full self. And that supports our process while we're writing, but it also helps access the memories and the details of those memories so that those details are just more organically, I would say, integrated into our writing.
It
And
seems
which
like
really
they're more accessible, right? And
yeah.
what do you find? I'm so curious, and this is a broad question, but maybe you can offer an example or two. When writers start to work this way, when they come to you and they start to work this way, what do they discover? Like what is
Mm,
something that gets discovered when you, because I noticed that when I came to your group and before we began, you had sort of a meditation or sort of a centering.
mhm,
And everyone, I promise you, like we were on Zoom, like you do these online classes, we all do. And Sherry led us through sort of a centering few minutes. And across the miles, across the internet, across the computer screens from every student who was there, and I was there to teach, I felt this sense of calm and steadiness and centering online across the miles. It was staggering to me.
mm,
And
mm.
I'm wondering what you've noticed as you've built this program up, this series. What do people discover sometimes that they didn't know was even there?
Well, I think what we discover when we become embodied, even something like you said, like doing a simple centering exercise for just a couple of minutes, is presence. That's what we're experiencing. We're experiencing presence. So the presence of the moment that we're in, which is not always where we are, and especially not where we are when we sit down to write or when we connect with others. We're thinking about what happened or where we want to go, and it becomes a very mind centered, like you said, severed from the body
Totally. I'm
experience.
just
Yeah.
ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. And so if we kind of approach our experience from that place, I think it also really, I think one of the things that has been a surprise to most of the students is or the people who come to write with me is that there have been people who have been writing for decades who haven't made that connection and realize, oh, I've been approaching the craft from my mind, not only approaching my memories from my mind and trying to recall mentally when we're embodied or when we're connected to the visceral part of the experience. We don't have to think about it or recall it from up here. It's like it is released from the body and then it's there for us. And so not only the process of what am I going to write and how am I going to write, it's more of a liberated feeling, like what wants to be written shows
Yes,
up.
and I could imagine it would be a great way to free write, to jump
Yeah.
into a new part of your text by free writing. So like I'm imagining that, let's say I decided to get tuned into my core or think of a time when the core of me felt, very wobbly and jellyish and
Hmm.
nervous, from maybe a childhood time. And I could just sit with that feeling. This is how I'm interpreting it. And
Hmm.
I'm not saying this is necessarily how it works for everyone. And then
Yep.
I could just start writing from that and sort of like building out my layers this way. My hands are going like this rather than this. And then, okay, I'm sort of like coming out this way and seeing what I
Exactly.
create that way, and you never know what kind of material you'll come up with.
Yeah, and it really supports our craft and the, the quality of our writing because we don't then have to think about, "Oh, now I have to make this memory sensory. Let me bring in the 5 senses." Like, the experience itself gives us the recollection or the memory or the feeling of something that we can then write it from that feeling. Or, for example, interiority. Like, instead of having to approach our stories and go, okay, now I need to get into what I was thinking and feeling on the inside versus what was happening on the outside to really create that conflict in this story. It's like it's a remembered, felt
Yeah.
sense, and it naturally kind of comes through the writing with a little bit I would say just a little bit more organically. Obviously, there's editing and improving on our writing, but what I've found is that I think most people are surprised that they have been writing so severed. They're also so surprised at how easily it is to recall and return to experience that they had in the past and
Mhm.
write it from that kind of full-bodied, remembering from all of the self as opposed to just recalling. And they're also surprised that it requires of us a little less of the going back in and revising and editing because more shows up for us.
Yeah, there's a lot more material. I
Yeah.
was gonna ask you, I have a question But I wanna warn you because I didn't tell you I was gonna ask you this, so I want you to
That's
have a
fine.
moment to think about it. I'm wondering if you might I have a question, and then I was gonna ask you if you maybe wanna offer, a little prompt or a suggestion
Mhm.
for those in attendance and those who watch after as, like, a little preview of maybe what you would do in class or maybe some type of one of your favorite go-to exercises.
Sure.
But before that, I was wondering if you could share a bit about how what you're talking about, um, the intersection of what you're talking about and this whole body experience and this kind of embodied writing works with being vulnerable and boundaries, how you
Mm.
keep yourself safe, how you are able to take care of yourself when you do this very, very delicate and deeply felt work.
Mhm, mhm. I think that it's a great question. So I think embodiment has a counterpart, which is regulating. And by that I mean working with our nervous system. So there when we are embodied and present, we're also tuned in to the experience that we're having full bodied. And that helps us to kind of work with regulating our nervous system, or the nervous system and embodiment work hand in hand, because if we're grounded, if we're breathing, if we're present to the experience that we're having, we're sending signals to our nervous system that in the moment of now, we're okay. So even if we're working with charged material or material that really hooks and drags us, past experiences that we're writing about, as we all know, memoir, right, comes with the risk of being upset
Yes, for
by
sure.
some of the experiences, and the self-care piece is really important. So along with the embodiment practices that I encourage memoirists to practice and take on, are also regulation practices. And just to be clear, regulation does not mean calm and everything's great and ooh, rainbows and unicorns. Like, I think we have a misinterpretation that having a regulated nervous system means everything feels at ease. That's not really true. Regulated nervous system means that whatever we're experiencing, we're there for it, but we're also there for it with enough awareness that we're not being hooked and dragged by it, but we're
Yeah, yeah.
allowing ourselves to have the experience, and we're noticing, we're going, "Oh, whew," instead of being like, "Oh my god, this happened and da da, and here I am and I'm so upset that, I'm writing about this and I'm triggered again and I'm angry." We go, "Oh, I'm angry. I noticed that. Where is this anger living in my body right now? Oh, it's living in my chest. What does it feel like? Feels like broken glass. Feels like heat. It feels like fire, like coals. Okay. So can you be with that feeling for a moment? Just notice it, take a couple breaths until the feeling changes, which it might take a little while, but it might not. And so we're constantly in a dialogue
Yeah, and
with
also that is a way to source some physiological description. I mean, not to be all like, editor and instructor myself, but I like when you so one of the other aspects of my disembodiment sometimes when I'm writing is it's harder for me personally to tell the reader, to show the reader what it was like in my body. But if
Mhm,
I'm having that experience while I'm writing this and I can stay with it and sort of articulate like what you just said, glass in my chest, coals, heat, that kind of a thing, that would be a really great way for me to remember how to describe it
mhm,
later when I'm writing my book so I don't just keep saying, I was angry, I was angry, I was upset, I was upset.
mhm,
I can talk about that because that was a really evocative thing you just described.
mhm. Yeah, it helps us to articulate it and put it on the page as we're feeling it, because our body doesn't know if it's happening in real time or if we're just triggered by the memory of it. So that's, a trigger is that where we're hijacked by our nervous system in a way that tells the body that we're still having the experience. And so it's responding as if we were in that situation. But when we can kind of break it down and stay embodied as the writer having the experience writing, as well as, can move ourselves in and out of the story and the memory while we're having it, the two two can really support one another. The two help us to, the me as character in the story, the experience that I'm having in the moment of writing it, I'm like, oh, this is how it felt. And then I can articulate that
Yeah,
feeling, like
yeah,
you just said. And then just by articulating it and writing it, I'm getting it out of my body and onto the page so I no longer have to carry it. So it's like
yeah.
this beautiful symbiotic relationship between that embodiment and staying regulated. And regulated, we can regulate our nervous system in so many different ways. Like physical space can help to regulate. So even as a writer, you can set up, you might not always have the perfect space for it, but you could bring with you the shell that makes you feel calm because it came from your favorite beach or whatever it is. You can physically regulate, and that's called auto regulation. It's like things that are in our environment that help us to steady and stay present or come back to it when we find ourselves leaving ourself and going into past or future, right? It helps us come back into the present moment, touching the stone, for example. Or we also regulate just by having practices with ourselves. Like for me, one very simple one, I rub my hands together. It helps me with writing. It helps to remind me to sit up and take a breath. And it just does, I'm a tactile person. So having something to touch, like my own hands. And also, I mean, this is like extra, but there's an energy center right in the center of our palms that connects to the heart. There are multiple energy centers that go up the arms from the palms. So when I rub my palms together, it reminds me to take a deep breath. It reminds me to come back into the present moment. It could
Wow.
be that. It could be opening or closing a door, taking a sip of water, something very simple that you can do when you feel, oh, I'm going too deep into this story, for example. I'm forgetting that I'm actually the writer in my chair writing. And now I'm back to 7 years old having that experience with mom or dad. I will pull away and just do something very simple that will bring me
Thank you.
back.
That is such a great
Mhm.
I don't think I ever knew that about the center of the
Yeah.
palm, and I love those suggestions you offer, and something that you said, I do wanna I know I promised everyone it's about a half hour live this is my plan, everyone, because I'm an organizer. My plan is to ask Sherry another question about the 3 voices that you talk about in your work, the 3 voices
Oh,
of
mhm.
memoirist, and then, maybe we can take a question.
Yeah, I would
Maybe
love
we
it.
could take a question or 2, and I promise everyone I'm gonna be very, responsible with your time, including yours, Sherry, so we will get out of here in, like, 7, 8 minutes. So if
Great.
anyone has a question that they wanna ask Sherry or me, you can start formulating it, but the first thing I wanna ask Sherry is, you talk about the 3 voices of the memoirist, the storyteller, reflective, and universal.
Mhm.
Can you and everyone it seems like teachers call it different things,
Yeah.
and some of us, we overlap with what we talk about, but can you share what those are for you?
Yeah, I think the storyteller voice that I'm talking about is the part of us that sits down and writes our story and just writes it out, gets it out of holding it in the dark of our own body and onto the page, right? The storyteller is the nitty-gritty. The storyteller is also bringing in all of the, sensory details and the beautiful writing the way we take our messes, for example, and turn them into art. That's the storyteller voice, and also the storyteller voice is often the character that we're in while we're writing.
Mhm.
That's our voice as that version of ourself that had that lived experience. And that's great. That's really telling our story, important. But the reflective voice, as you know, right, is then now we're older, we're wiser, we're in a different stage in our life. Even if I'm thinking about between the computer and myself, on the page, I might be 7-year-old Sherry, but I'm sitting in my chair as 55-year-old Sherry, and I have some reflection on that experience. And so I want to offer the not in every single chapter, but, say in a memoir as a whole or within our stories, I want to offer that perspective that I now have on that lived experience. So what I'm saying is, here's what happened. And then I'm saying, here's what matters to me about what happened, right? That would be more of the reflective voice. And then the universal voice comes in and even says, here's what happened to me. Here's why what happened to me matters to you, the reader, right? So there's the here's my story with all the beauty and grit. And
Mhm.
then the reflective voice, we want to look at our stories and come back in and say, here's the meaning I'm finding in the story for myself. That's my
Yeah.
reflection. And the
Yeah.
universal voice will then come, and this is what happened to me matters to you. Why how my story adds to the human condition or the instruction manual for being alive on this planet. And I
Yeah.
think that's really what takes memoir from just being our own personal story to it speaking to others or having meaning for others. And when we look at our own experience through those various voices or lenses, it gives us a beautiful opportunity to just reflect, respond differently, reimagine, maybe even retell our story, have new relationship, new perspective, all those beautiful things that happen as memoir as we write our memoir. We might go into it thinking that we're
Thinking
doing
it's
one
one thing.
thing
Right, of
and
course,
we
and
come out of it completely
yeah.
changed, with
Yes, and
so much
also
understanding.
if your memoir is ending in a different place than you thought it would or with something new that happened, congratulations, because that's awesome, right? Like, I wrote about this in a Substack a couple months ago that if you knew the end of the story,
Right.
the real end of the story, would you be as captivated about reading it? And similarly, when you're writing, you really often don't know what you're going to discover, and if you can go into it, especially with memoir writing and a lot of writing too, any kind of creative nonfiction and even fiction, not knowing what's going to happen, then you can make yourself curious and eager for that as well. Now, I did promise a question. So if anyone has a question,
Hmm.
and then the plan for the rest of the time will just be take a question and then I'm going to talk about where people can find you, Sherry, and we'll just kind of wrap it up. So if anyone has a
Great.
question, you can send it in. And while we're waiting for that, I wanted to share with you that I had Bridie Thelen Hyland on my show. She wrote Bright Eyes, and she writes press author, and she told me that when she was working on her material about her mom and her childhood, which was very upsetting and abusive, she would go to hot yoga and she would bring paper and a pencil or a
Mm.
pen. And when she was, for example, in pigeon pose, she would just start writing whatever happened to occur to her, which is something I hadn't even thought about doing. But when you're in some type of a yoga
Hmm.
situation or a deep kind of somatic stretching situation, I'm sure memories are becoming unlocked. And that would be
Yes.
amazing to be able to write them down.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I mean by memory is not doesn't just live in the mind. It actually, and as we know, even from, modern science is finally catching up to more sacred or spiritual sciences, that those memories live in our bodies. And so something like a deep stretch, especially pigeon pose, because the hips don't lie, um, that, you go into a deep stretch. I'm sure anyone, whether it's a yoga pose or a long walk or anything else where there's movement involved, sometimes you have these releases and you feel something emotionally that you didn't know was there.
Yeah, and
And I
actually
love,
there's a question right here. It says, "What poses Sherry?" Well, someone just bought your book. They said, "Just bought your
oh,
book, Sherry."
thank you.
And, she's a fellow yogi, or I can't see who wrote that, but they're asking, "What poses do you find most stimulating to creativity?" That's for
Ooh.
you.
That's a great question. I think hip opening poses, so thus Bridie's suggestion about going into pigeon pose and writing. Hip opening poses, I think I think a lot, almost all of them, and it almost doesn't matter what pose, but if I had to speak to some poses that help to inspire, release and inspire creativity, I would say go for the hip opening poses, especially because the hips kind of represent the quality of water, and so there's like fluidity, creativity, currency, all those things live in the hips. And it just has a little bit more kind of swooshiness, which which I think is also really encouraging for creative flow. But
Yeah,
anything that helps us to tap into our own, anything that inspires creativity is a great place to start from. Even if it's your favorite song, just put it on or
yeah,
yeah. But I would say at this stage in my yoga practice, seated, just being quiet and sitting in sukhasana or an easy cross-legged pose for me is what brings me there but I have a long-standing meditation practice. So I'm finding that what's inspiring my creativity these days a little bit more is just being really quiet and listening
Yeah.
and seeing what shows up. Yeah.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. Now, if you would like to learn more about Sherry, so Sherry's memoir is A Smoke and a Song, and you can get it wherever books are sold. And what about finding you on social media and finding your classes? Where should people look you up? And I know you're on Substack too.
Yes, all 3, it's under Sherry Sidoti. So SherrySidoti. So Instagram, Substack, and my website, sherrysidoti.com. And I do have a new group starting in the middle of October. If any of you want to join, reach out to me. I'd love to hear from you. I keep the groups really small, 8 to 10 people. So I have a few spots left for the one that's coming up. And Ronit, the only thing is I'm bummed that we don't get it. I wanted to ask you some questions, but I know that we're running out of time.
Why don't you ask me one? And anyone who has to jet off, they can go, and then
Yeah.
I will keep my answer compact.
Great. So, one of the questions that, well, first of all, this is the most pressing question that I have. You do so much for us, for memoirists. You have such a beautiful platform and your gorgeous podcast and everything that you do to get our voices heard out there. And I just want to know, for all of those of us who you have supported, how can we best support you as you go into the next 200 episodes of
Right.
your podcast? And how can we support you? That's what I really want to know.
This
And I know
woman,
that's
Sherry, you're just like, I don't know, I just have all the lovey feelings. Thank you so much. The people who show up to this kind of a live, I just saw a paid subscriber, which was so lovely.
mm,
I do this because I want to do it, and the best way you can support me is if you like the podcast, if you like the Substack, share it with your friends, tell people. If you know someone who is looking for good recommendations for a class they're teaching, tell them.
mhm.
If you know someone who's looking for advice, send them my way. I have resources. I'm not here for the fame or the money, right? Like, I
Well,
don't know.
yeah, we know that as writers.
Yeah, I just keep doing the memoir thing. I don't know why. I'm just in this rabbit hole. I love it. And I just want to, I don't know. I don't have an easy answer except share it if you like it, tell your friends, and leave a review. Get my memoir when she comes back. All of that is great. And I'm really happy to have hosted this with you. And like, I can't wait to repost it, and so many important moments and kernels of wisdom here and
Mm,
new resources that we can use, Sherry. And I'm glad that you continue to offer your program, because I saw right here someone just wrote how wonderful your program was, and they took it and they think
oh,
you're amazing. And I couldn't see the name, but I want to thank
thank
everyone
you.
for being here. Sherry, thank you for we were planning to do this back in June, right? I asked you in June, and now here it is. I can't believe it. I'm so happy you did it. You're a wonderful, wonderful resource and human, and I'm just so happy to know you.
Oh, love you. I feel the same way. I feel the same way. Thank you so much for having me here.
Yeah, thank you everyone for attending, and share this. It'll be posted now. You can share it with anyone who you think needs it. And have a great weekend, everyone. Mwah.
Yeah.
Thank you
Mwah.
so much for helping me
Thanks.
celebrate. Bye.
Yes. Congratulations.
Thank you.